Good day to you. It's good to be here. We've been out a little bit because of busyness and just going and sickness and all, but glad to be back to my eye surgery and all that. We are glad we are going to look again at what I call just Bible 101. We are going to look now beginning in the books of history. We aren't going to go through each book and all this, but I want to basically introduce to us and now the study of what happened when the Israelite got out of the desert. What happened to them? This is the time where the Israelites became really the start of fulfilling the promise that was to them about the land. That Abraham was promised basically that he would have a great nation and they would receive all this land. Here, in the rest of this study of the history, we are going to see this being fulfilled. And then the stage set for the second or the third promise, that is that the Messiah would come. Now in this, I think in Joshua, the great thing about Joshua is finding out that here he took over after Moses. You talk about a hard shoes to follow. That's probably the hardest shoes to follow of anybody that had ever lived. There's never been anyone, but he was the man that was able to do that. He done that, and we can see what happened. And that is, he stepped up, and God was with him, and the people got behind him. Now you got to remember, these was the people, matter of fact, these was the men that realized that he was one of the two men that was older than everybody else. He was the only senior there, and he wasn't that old, but he was able to be the one that they would follow. And we can see, it says, what did they say? In chapter 1, verse 17, when he asked them, they said this. It says, just as we heeded Moses in all things, so we will heed you. Only the Lord your God be with you as he was with Moses. Man, I think that was kind of a statement and a prayer. I really do. They said, we are going to heed you like we did. And this is the statement that was made. I think this is so great. Now it says in chapter 2, now Joseph, the son of Nun, he sent forth 2 men. He'd sent 2 men across to spy out the land. Now, this is only needed 2. Last time, Moses sent out 12. He should have sent out just 2, because 10 came back a bad report. But these 2 went out. And I think this is something that I want to tie this in to something that happened earlier in this book. And that is the promise to Abraham. Abraham was promised in 18 and 16, he says, you are going to receive this land. But God said this, the sins of the Amorites are not yet full. Somebody said, what do you mean? Well, he was going to get that land, but he wasn't going to get it then because the people was not sinning enough. There were still righteous people in that land. We know that because we can look at basically chapter 14 there in Genesis in verse 18, and we see that there was a priest of the Most High God. I don't know what percent or was there, but there was people there that still worship God. Now I say that's because some people don't realize that God spoke to Abraham, God spoke to Israel, God spoke to Moses, but God still loved other parts of mankind, those that obeyed him. The book of Jonah was an Israelite that went and preached to non-Israelites and told them God wanted them to repent. He had people, God we can see this in Romans 2 and 14. Because it says there in Romans 2 and 14, it says the Gentiles had been a law unto themselves. That is, the Gentiles had a law that God expected them to follow. They didn't have the 10 Commandments, they didn't have the law, but God had a law He expected them to follow. We see that in Jonah. We realize that. But now we do realize this, that according to the New Testament, we're going in to get into that, it said He broke down the middle wall of partition. That is the law, the things that were separating them, and made of the twain of the two one new flesh. That's why Jesus, the Great Commission says, go into all the world. Not to the Jews, but all the world, because Jesus came to bring the descendants of Abraham and the descendants of, if you want to think of it, the descendant of Melchizedek, together to be what? To be one. And this is what we can see here. I say that because now we're going to look and see that He sent forth the spies. And they went into Jericho. And I think it's kind of neat because when they went into Jericho, they went to where, they went to Rahab the harlot. Some said, why did they do that? Well, because they didn't have hotels like that and things like that in the cities. And that's one place that a stranger could go and nobody thought anything about it. I mean, honestly. And they said they went in there and went to sleep, to rest. Well, then they found out about it. Somebody told about it. And then they came in and they wanted her to turn them over. But she hid them. And you know why she hid them? It says this. She said, we have heard how the Lord. And in the spelling, it uses the big L. Not a Lord, but what? The Lord. It says here in verse 10 of chapter 2, for we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the two kings. What? So they realized who they realized. And by the way, I always, for some reason, I don't know why, but for the first time, something clicked in my mind, and for too long, I've always read this, and for some reason, I used the pronoun I, brother. Does that make sense? But it didn't say I, it says we. We. Sometimes we have looked and said, well, she was somebody that believed and trusted in God. But the thing about it is, they let them down. They made a pact. They made a promise with her. But they said, if you or any of you others, they made that with her father, her mother, her brother, and her sisters, and their families. Sound like a tribe. It says, if any of them tell. They knew it. They kept it. What does that show me? There was a whole family. I don't know how many was there, but there had to have been at least 2 sisters and 2 brothers, and what they had. And they all trusted in God. They was in a fortified city with a bunch of ragtag army outside, but they trusted in God instead of the walls. Isn't that something? I don't know, but yes, I do know. God knew who was in that city. God knew who was in that city. Even some 300 years before, God did not let Abraham have the promised land, because there were some there that still worshiped him. There were some there that still believed on him, but he arranged it that they were saved. They stayed there and they were saved. The providence of God. I think the providence of God leads a lot of people to hear the gospel. if we have the right kind of moral conduct in our minds, I think God will allow us to hear the gospel. If you're listening to this lesson, I believe God has had a hand in it. I just believe that. And I want you to know that we are here to help you to listen to what God says in His book. Because it's through the pages of this book, it's about the story of the gospel of Jesus Christ, that you like this woman and her family were saved because they trusted in God. Will you not trust in God beginning now in your life? God be with you till we meet again.